Greetings, class. My name is Christopher Delaney. Ultimately, my dissertation argues that the genesis period of American trap shooting, that's roughly about 1890 to about 1923 with the establishment of the Amateur Trap Shooting Association. It emerged as a central moral institution of the progressive era. It transformed populist violent spectacles into disciplined, ethical, democratic leisure. It embraced this organization, standardization, technological reforms. It moralized consumer culture, negotiated corporate authority. There was growing gender inclusion. And through this all, trap shooting, it had this way to reconcile progressive era anxieties over violence, masculinity, capitalism, even citizenship. It's more than a leisure pastime. It deserves historical reconsidering. So ultimately, for my thesis, trap shooting functioned as a microcosm of progressive ideology, demonstrating how moral order, expertise, democratic participation all were cultivated outside of just politics and labor. So this week we're supposed to go through our top 5, historians that we're building off of for our research. For me, I don't really think I can start any progressive era dissertation without taking a look at the works of Richard Hofstadter in his work, The Age of Reform, published in 1955. It's going to go ahead and it kind of builds on, the pre-World War II era work, specifically Charles and Mary Beard, who took, progressivism. They took progressive reform, as more altruistic, and obviously it has the iconic economic bend of Beard. So to Hofstadter, progressivism was far more psychological. It was where the middle class, they feared their erosion of their social position. They seen this decay of moral values, all caused by industrialization, immigration, urbanization in society. And in this way, he kind of positions this idea of this status anxiety, this, agrarian myth that progressives were looking to restore these old populist era ideals. And ultimately we just can't look, or I should say overlook Hofstadter and his significant importance, for really introducing not just an economic side, progressive era history, but, really taking the study and putting it into the psychological, anxieties into the minds of a lot of, not just the people, but the reformers of the era. It's really helpful for me. It provides a framework to better understand, the rise of trap shooting as it parallels the progressive era, and it kind of helps me better situate trap shooting as this idea of respectable leisure in an era that there was all of these different, building anxieties. In fact, I actually have a chapter that's kind of dedicated to showing how the evolution of trap shooting moves from this populist era, ideal that individual marksmanship, even like frontier violence, is kind of where the sport starts, but it evolves, into this, moral self-restraint, organized leisure, that it actually becomes. So really Hofstadter helps me consider, recreational shooting, trap shooting as a cultural mechanism that really helps resolve a lot of these era anxieties that, he introduces. Not just Hofstadter though. So, Hofstadter was really instrumental in creating that, consensus school. And then we have Robert Wiebe, who comes a little bit later. 1967, he publishes his work, The Search for Order, which is so instrumental in moving that, that historiography forward. He argues that America really transformed from this decentralized society into a nation that embraced this modern bureaucracy, expertise, standardized institutions. He didn't really focus on on, the progressive era, anxieties, the psychological anxieties, that did Hofstadter. He instead, looks more towards, those professional government organizations that were built. And where this helps with my my dissertation is trap shooting. By the 1890s, when it really starts to develop up until really, I'm looking at going until after World War One. It is a sport that is increasingly organized. You have the creation of the Interstate Association, which is highly valued for the order, the standardization, the expertise that they bring, to the sport nationwide, which really does mirror Weeby's search for order as well. As he says that, a chaotic, industrialized America, is searching for those organized institutions in order to bring order to this. Next, I think we should look at Thomas Haskell, his 1977 work, The Emergence of a Professional Social Science. I think that's a wonderful text there to kind of build off of Weeby's argument. So Haskell built on that idea that the Americans just sought more professional expertise, right? Weeby more or less explored, the what organizations there were, right? He more explained the what, not so much the why, especially as it dictated some of these social institutions that were created. It was Haskell, though, who really started to explore, why those changes were occurring, why people were searching for order, not just the fact that they were. Weeby, I think, is more of a social historian, and I think Haskell, especially with the look at scientific knowledge, trained professionals, standardization, he's more of an intellectual historian, and I think the two differ in that way. And again, that idea of bringing the Interstate Committee, I should say the Interstate Association into this, and then that transforms into the AATA and then the ATA. Those standardized bodies, between the work of Weeby and Haskell, I can really start to get that framework of understanding trap shooting as this institution. I think my meeting here, I have to make sure I'm still in. Okay, stay in call, just so we don't lose everybody. Okay, sorry about that. So after Haskell, we're moving into, the 1980s here. We have Dominic Cavallo, Muscles and Morals, his 1981 publication there. So earlier, my work with Haskell and Weeby and Hofstadter, and they're looking at the institutions, they're looking at the psychological anxieties. None of them, though, bring in the idea of leisure, and that's why I want to go ahead and bring in, Cavallo as this next, instrumental historian, for arguing this dissertation. Cavallo depicted social reformers as using, especially the playground movement, as a middle class vehicle, to cultivate discipline, citizenship, masculinity, morality, in urban society, especially, looking at middle class, cultivating these ideas in, immigrants and working class societies, as they go through these playground movements, and also leisure, as a whole, sport as well. Cavallo illustrates that, sport and recreation matter to progressive era historiography. Sport, that leisure is a moral institution that we should better understand that era from, which is so helpful as I'm trying to place trap shooting as that recreational, sporting institution that acts as a microcosm for understanding the era. And I think that brings me up into the 2000s. I think that the last major pivotal work, obviously, there's numerous, is Michael McGurr's A Fierce Discontent, that was published in 2003. McGurr basically argued, it helps kind of adjust the reform motives, of these reformers, from just like alleviating these social middle class, problems. more so to kind of getting behind, the idea of what it was that they were trying to create. They were trying to create, not just attack the social problems, but they're trying to recreate America within their own image. I mean, they're really trying to reshape America, not just addressing the problems, but to recreate, this American image, and the idea of these middle class reformers. McGurr establishes, also for me, which is helpful, is the fall of progressivism, or at least I should say the progressive era itself. I mean, he really, puts an end date there with the end of World War I. And then looking at, the progressive era, then leading to later progressive reforms and like the New Deal and things like that, which is outside, the realm of my dissertation as well. And it's ironic, that trap shooting really has its foundational years in 1890 till the end of World War I, which directly parallels what we're seeing with the progressive era, especially when considering McGurr's time frame that he creates. He looks at the way that communities, formulate their framework for understanding, what is a reformed society. And I think in this way, the trap shooting community itself also has their own image of what they think, not just society, as a whole, but at least the trap shooting community, okay, what values, what morals, they need to live by as well, which I find super helpful, to kind of build off that work of McGurr. I guess ultimately, historians have already explored the progressive era commitment to discipline, to, autonomy, consumerism, expertise, morality, and they do all of this. They do it through settlement housing, they do it through labor movements, they do it through legislation halls, but they haven't taken the time, to explore, trap shooting. Trap shooting is one of those sports that's on the peripheral. There's a huge sizable gap in the scholarship that needs to be addressed. Trap shooting deserves to be recovered from those margins of historical analysis. It's a very heavily underutilized mechanism for demonstrating how Americans negotiated moral order, expertise, democratic participation, all during this progressive era. So guys, that's my, 5 historians that I want to go ahead and share with you this week. Ultimately, I look forward to everything that you guys share as well. And, beyond anything else, good luck with your comprehensive exam this week. I know I'm looking forward to getting mine done and out of the way as well. So enjoy. I'll look for your comments, in our forums. All right, guys, have a nice day.